Welcome to this very important Chamber AM event. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Julie Seedhouse. I'm a broker with Century 21 Hometown Brokers, and I'm the chair of the Billings Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. Your chamber thrives on collaboration and creating space for people to connect. That's why we bring members together with impactful community leaders to build relationships, seize opportunities, identify challenges, and promote positive outcomes. These events wouldn't be possible without our incredible sponsors. Thank you to KTVQ and to Visit Billings. We sure appreciate your support, and we couldn't do this without you. Oh, good. We're here today to learn more about professional venue management. The Chamber believes that MetraPark is a vital public asset for Billings and Yellowstone County. We know MetraPark is a catalyst for visitation to our community, and it generates a significant amount of non-resident dollars to regional businesses. We support efficient and effective operations of MetraPark, as well as improvements to its facilities to help maximize its full potential. Today we have the opportunity to hear from leaders in other communities about the benefits of professional management and the partnerships that they've developed in those communities. It's my honor to introduce the presenters that you'll be hearing from in a little bit. We have from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Mayor Paul Tenhaiken. Since taking office as mayor of Spicy Sioux Falls in May of 2018, Paul Tenhaiken has amassed a list of accomplishments for the city by putting people first and taking strategic steps to ensure the continued success of South Dakota's largest city. Through his One Sioux Falls framework, Mayor Tenhaiken's focus is on safety, housing, workforce, and engaging people across Sioux Falls, which was named one of the best-run cities in the country in 2021. A thought leader, Mayor Tenhaiken was selected for the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Initiative with a focus on innovation and chairs the FCC's Intergovernmental Advisory Committee. A dedicated public servant, successful entrepreneur, and avid athlete, Mayor Tenhaiken's proudest accomplishment is his family, his wife Jill, and his wonderful 3 children. Joining Mayor Tenhaiken is the Sioux Falls Director of Finance, Sean Pritchett. As Director of Finance, Sean oversees the development and implementation of the city's $650 million budget and $820 million capital program. The Finance Department also serves as contract manager for the city's event venues, including a convention center and arena, Denny Sanford Premier Center, baseball stadium, historic Orpheum Theater, and the Washington Pavilion for Arts and Sciences. Sean serves as the city's liaison to the event complex, advisory board, and the Visitors Bureau Business Improvement District, among others. We're also joined by Mayor Debbie Kling from Napa, Idaho. Debbie Kling was originally sworn in as mayor of Napa in 2018. She was reelected in 2021. Before taking office, Mayor Kling was the president and CEO of the Napa Chamber of Commerce, where she served from 2012 until taking office. Prior to joining the Napa Chamber of Commerce, Debbie worked as the vice president of legal management for Unity Media Group, a startup technology company, general manager of the then Quest Arena, and executive director of Team Idaho, which organized the National Governors and Western Governors Association meetings hosted by then Governor Dirk Kempthorne. Debbie has served in leadership roles on local and national industry and community boards, including founding the team for the National Academy of Venue Safety and Security. Debbie married Jim Kling III in 1975, and together they are blessed with 3 children and 10 grandchildren. Thank you so much to all 3 of you for being here. We can't wait to hear what you have to say. And now I'd like to invite Dan Brooks, the Chamber's Business Advocacy Director, to share some information about Chamber's resources.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Dan Brooks. I'm the Business Advocacy Director at the Billings Chamber of Commerce. We're going to go over some of the resources that we've got on our resource library so that you can refer back to those if you'd like after this discussion to learn a little bit more or to kind of check back in as we add more to that page. So in order to get there, just go to our homepage, billingschamber.com. Up on the top, there will be a rotator of various links. Look for this exact same kind of text title. Click on that, and it'll get you there. So the first thing that you'll see is our chamber position on there, and as Julie mentioned, you'll see it in the preface here too. We want to acknowledge that there are significant benefits. There's a great economic impact that we receive to our businesses from the operations at MetraPark. So we do want to acknowledge and recognize that it is a gem for our community. But we also want to ensure that it's operating as effectively and efficiently as possible. And so that leads us to our position statement here. We believe MetraPark will be managed most effectively by a professional venue management company with arm's length oversight by the county commissioners and ownership remaining with the public. So I just want to quickly go through each of those components because I think it speaks to a number of the elements of the discussion that we're having in our community right now. First, we believe MetraPark will be managed most effectively by a professional venue management company. We inherently believe at the Chamber that business is more efficient and effective than government. And as we engage in this public versus private debate, what we're really engaging in is government-run operations versus business-run operations. And we believe that we'll be better off with business-run operations. The second point there, with arm's length oversight by the commissioners, we've heard concern, a little bit of wariness that a private company would come in and dictate all the rules and call all the shots, and that's simply not the case. They establish a relationship with the owner of the facility and ensure that, and I'll show it in a little bit, how they can generate win-wins for the community. But at the end of the day, the owner of the facility, in this case the commissioners, still have the oversight and still need to approve budgets, policies, rates and pricing, and ensure that community organizations are included in the use of the facility. And lastly, that ownership remains with the public. We're not talking about the sale of MetraPark to the highest bidder. We're just talking about that management component. So the first report that you'll find on the resource library is the Venue Solutions Group report. This was put together by a third party doing this operations audit and drafted and published their findings earlier this year. And to be quite honest, the findings were not good. I've highlighted a couple here and just want to point to them. The report found there are few, if any, written policies and procedures, including checklists for MetraPark operations. And the other one that I'd like to highlight here is that a recurring theme was a lack of overall organizational goal setting and setting of employee expectations. Now that looks like it's really taking to task the employees and the staff. And I just want to say here, knowing how large operations, whether business, government, I reflect on my time in the military. When I see that, I know that that's actually a failure of leadership, not on the staff, not on the employees. And in our case here, this is government-run leadership, right? So we're making the case here, let's get government out of the way. Let's let the private sector come in and change things for the better here. The second report that we have on there is the public outreach and engagement findings from the Vision 2025 work that was done looking at ways that we can uplift, that we can add amenities, add facilities to the MetraPark campus. And similar to the VSG report, the public feedback and input on the operations and management was not favorable. I've got the two paragraphs here, but really what hits home to me is this statement here, that there seems to be a culture of no at MetraPark. We've also got the last 7 years of finances for MetraPark operations. As you can see, over the last 7 years, there's a significantly increasing operational loss and an increasing taxpayer subsidy. This ties in, of course, to the discussions that we're having about what we need for the Vision 2025 project, bringing new facilities to MetraPark, adding new amenities. But I think we need to be cautious here. If we can't get the operational foundation right and get this, the finances squared away, adding amenities and adding operational complexity could then lead to larger and increasing public subsidies, and we want to avoid that. Now, I'll briefly mention, I've been told that fiscal year 2022 is better than the previous year, maybe a couple other years, but I have not seen those numbers yet. Once I get that, I will add it to the spreadsheet, so please be sure to check back to the resource library. We've also got the financial picture for Sioux Falls and Napa. I just want to mention it so that you know that they're there, but I'm not going to go into any details because I would be stealing thunder from our wonderful guests. We've got a number of FAQs on there answering some questions that the community has brought up to us, so please check in there if you're curious to see what we've got there. And lastly, we've heard in the community and from one of our elected leaders that private management comes in, they get all the benefits and have no risk. And that's simply not the case. As I've looked through a few of these arrangements, I've found that these are structured in such a way to incentivize a productive relationship that leads to win-win solutions for both owner and manager. I have to admit I was a little bit hesitant to try to share these graphs because they can be complex, but I'm going to try to walk us through it here because I think it's really important to acknowledge that this is a shared gain or shared loss scenario, but really we're looking to form a win-win for our community. Let me first provide a couple of caveats here. This is what I've gathered looking at different arrangements that vary in a number of ways, and this is not how a contract with MetraPark has to look. Two, these numbers are my hypothetical scenario for purposes of explaining a shared gain and shared loss scenario, or the shared gain and shared loss nature of these arrangements. And I would hope that at some point we can get MetraPark operating without a subsidy, but not wanting to set expectations too high, you can see where I've provided this hypothetical benchmark. So the way that these operate is a benchmark is established. That baseline or benchmark is established, set by both owner and manager. It is what the owner budgets for, and it's the goal for the manager to meet in their operations throughout the year. This helps provide predictability and stability in budgeting. So for the purposes of this explanation, I've assumed the manager operated the facility at a loss of $500,000. $500,000 better than the benchmark. Now, depending on the rate specified in the contract, and I've seen a range from 10 to 30%, I've set a flat rate here of 25 just for explanation purposes. You can see that while the manager gets some benefit and some profit, the lion's share of the benefit stays with the owner, right? So even at the 25% rate, 75% of that benefit stays with the owner, all because of the good work of the operations of the private manager. So you can see here that the owner can pay the manager with the budget savings, which is larger than the benefit that would go to the professional management, and really what we have here is a win-win scenario. Looking at that loss, let's say that they don't operate to that benchmark standard. For the purposes of this explanation, I've assumed the manager operated the facility, for the purposes of this explanation, I've assumed the manager doesn't meet the benchmark. In these arrangements, the manager is on the hook for the first money out, usually capped at 50% of their management fee, which is what's built into the operational expense. That's what they are paid yearly to simply manage the facility. But you can see that this creates a couple scenarios. One in which, if they don't meet that benchmark, the private manager not only doesn't profit, but also is the first money out, paying back some of their management fee, right? There's another scenario where the owner might have to add on to that and help make up that difference. But what we have is a structure here that incentivizes both owner and manager to work together for the greater benefit, to have shared gains for the community, and that's really what we're looking for. At the end of the day, the takeaway is this: there's no zero-sum outcome in these arrangements. When one benefits, one doesn't necessarily lose. There is a significant incentive for owner and manager to work together to ensure they don't have a shared loss and both receive a shared benefit. But let's not just leave it at that. Please don't just take my word for it, my hypothetical scenario. We've got some great representatives of communities that have figured this out. How do they establish that relationship between owner and manager and provide a win-win for their communities? So please help me welcome Mayor Paul Tenhaiken and Sean Pritchett to the stage.
All right, thanks, Dan. We're going to kind of ham and egg this thing up here. Thanks for having us. Thanks for inviting us. My name is Paul Tenhaiken. As mentioned, I'm the mayor of Sioux Falls. I was elected in 2018, about the same time Bill was, actually, which I think is very cool that the mayor of Billings is named Bill. I think that's really interesting. And we have been in a position similar to you over the last couple of years with COVID and what it's done to our facilities, and trying to figure out what the next chapter looks like in events and conventions and so forth. We got a call and said, hey, would you guys come and talk about your facilities with us here in Billings? So we have no agenda other than to tell you this is what's happened in Sioux Falls, this is what's worked, this is what hasn't worked. I came from the private sector before this. In the private sector, you hoard secrets. You don't want to share information with your competitor. In government, what I love about it is if we find something that works, we want to tell every other city about it. It's like, hey, this worked for us, and you should know about it, and this was successful. So that's why we're here today. By way of background, just real quick to provide some visuals, we have an event center complex that you'll see here on the screen. That consists of, on the left side of the screen is our premier center, which is about 12,000 seat venue. Right to the right of that, though, those three arches, then you have a convention center. And then on the far right is our old arena. That's about a 5,000-6,000 seat venue that served as kind of our main event concert facility before the Premier Center was built and opened in 2014. It was built in 2014 for $117 million. We have generated about $70 million in revenues since the place opened, and about almost $14 million in net income since that time. It's been, for all intents and purposes, for us, it's been very successful for the community. I would say if there was one do-over that I would like to do, I would have located this whole complex closer to our downtown. It's about 2 miles from our downtown. But in spite of that, it still does very well. We got a lot of key events that, and like you have here, kind of core events that we rely on every year that have become part of the community. One example being a Summit League basketball tournament. D1 Summit League tournament is there every year. That's become a staple in the community. Not unlike Billings, we have rodeo events that are staples in our community. In fact, we're working with another potential PRCA event right now that we've been working on this week. And so that's also why I think this conversation is relevant, because we're not from Miami or Austin or Nashville. We're from Sioux Falls, 200,000 people, and we have a similar kind of agricultural and rural tie to Sioux Falls. Just a couple other shots of our convention center. That convention center that you see in the lower right there, when it's fully set up like that, we can probably have up to 1,500 people for a plated seated event like that. On the left, lower left, we have a Sheraton, a full-service hotel that's attached to it. That was built in the, late 90s. Kind of feels that way a little bit too. They haven't done a lot to it since then, but it's a great property that's connected to the facilities, and so that does well for us when we have events. We also have then on that same campus a baseball stadium and an aging arena. We have a Northern League baseball team, the Sioux Falls Canaries. That's kind of the core tenant there, but we have a lot of state tournaments and things like that. So we have this whole campus that is managed by one organization, which Sean will talk about a little bit as we get into the numbers and kind of the relationship with, in our case, ASM Global, who manages the operations, and then we also work with Spectra on the food and beverage side. The operating income for us, like I said, it's been a profitable venture for us, with the exception of 2020, which you just kind of throw that year out of there. But we have been fortunate, even in that year, we had about $5 million in cash reserves that had been built up that we still have never had put any money from the city into the facility to support operations. Now we do have, which is unique to us, which you don't have here, we have this third penny entertainment tax. So this entertainment tax fund does support capital improvements to the facility, new video boards, things like that. So I know every community is just different with their structure on how they tax and spend and support facilities like this. But for the most part, it's been a highly successful facility for us from a financial standpoint. We are in the process, though, right now, and number one on your screen there is that arena, that old arena. Number two is that convention center. Number 3 is that baseball field. That's an aerial look at the campus. We're in the process, just like you are looking at the future master plan for your campus, of what it's going to look like going forward. How are we going to manage it? What are the proper facilities that we need to have? And so we're in the process of determining what city dollars we may have to put to that. That hotel that I mentioned, that's aging. Do we have to make some changes there? And so a lot of changes will be coming to this campus in the future. We started this process several years ago, but it was delayed because of COVID. And what does conferences and events look like in the future, and so forth. So I'm going to let Sean dig into our management structure a little bit and how that's evolved over time. We have not been in the management of our facilities since the early 90s, really, when we turned it over to a third-party management company and manage our facilities. A very relevant example that I like to use, and we used it a couple times in our conversation just yesterday, is we have 3 municipal golf courses in Sioux Falls. They're great courses. They get a ton of play. But 5 years ago, we put that out to bid. Now, it was being privately managed, but not well. We put it out to bid because we wanted to keep stepping back from being in the golf course management business, because I don't think that's what government should do. And since that time, we have had the 4 most profitable years in the history of the courses, and our course satisfaction scores are the highest they've ever been since the courses have been under municipal control. And that's because we hired a company, Landscapes Unlimited in that case, that they know courses and they know what they're doing, and they've pinched every dime of revenue out of that. They're pre-selling memberships. It's been very successful for the city. Whereas before, we were budgeting in a loss every year. Like, all right, we got to budget in this loss for the golf courses again this year. And we knew we had to do something different because we can't keep losing money. That's a bad business model. And my background in the private sector, people always ask me, hey, are you running City Hall like a business? And I always say, well, I'm not, because the goal of a business is to make money. And that's not the goal of a city. It's not to maximize profits. And so we're good at delivering wastewater, storm sewer solutions, public safety. I'm going to let other people who can maximize profits for our for-profit venues take that over. So Sean's going to talk about that a little bit.
Thank you. As the mayor said, we before this time, this is back when we just had the arena. We were under city management, so we had the arena, we had the baseball stadium. The late 90s, we built our convention center with about 60,000 square feet. And in the early 90s, we actually moved from being municipal managed to having third-party management. And at that time, we worked with Ogden Sports for many years, which eventually, I believe, became SMG, which has become ASM Global during that time period. We switched managers for about a 4-year period when we went to Global Spectrum and Spectra. And then when we built the event center, that opened in 2014, but was being built during 2012, 2013, we went back out for another RFP and ended up selecting, keeping Spectra as our food service provider, but also hiring ASM Global as our main facility manager. So 2 different companies. By way of the way we structured it, our facility manager manages our contract with our food and beverage operator, which happens to be Spectra. So competitors in the market, but work very collaboratively in our current system. And it's worked very good with us and have kind of gotten the best of all worlds as we've kind of structured that. As Daniel kind of alluded to, every community is a little bit different in how you structure your management fees, and we'll talk a little bit about this, but you want to structure them in a way that fits the culture of your community and the objectives that you're trying to accomplish with your facility. In our case, we have accounts. The cash accounts are held by ASM Global, but they're vested with the city. So they have operating accounts. We don't book the revenues and expenses on the city's side, but we book the net changes in equity. So if they take a loss, we have to appropriate for that loss. If they make a profit, we book that profit on the city's financial statements. And so, and in every year we've had a positive net income. During that COVID year is when we took that loss. And, you know, we'll talk a little bit about, you know, how we worked. We worked very closely with our facility manager. And when we hit COVID, we work with them very closely. Many communities were just laying people off from those facilities in order to just cut the expenses because they were bleeding. We told our facility manager, look, we don't want to lay anybody off. So they're not our employees and we can't tell you what to do, but our vision for you is that you would not lay anybody off from this facility. And the reason why is we want to be first back to the market. We know this is going to be back. We know others are going to struggle to come back. We don't want to have to rehire people with experience. So this is what we would advise to do, and we're willing to take the loss to make that happen. And that's what we ended up accomplishing. And I think that's just a good example of how we work very closely and collaboratively with our facility manager. We consider it a partnership, not a vendor relationship. And I think if you go into it with that mindset, they're operating as an agent or an extension of the city. So communication, as we'll talk about it, is really key as you kind of go into that. Just some of the benefits that we've found here, and I'm going to try to keep on time. Hopefully we're doing okay here.
Right there, so
Okay.
that's all we
I don't know when we started, so that's a good start. I'm just going to keep talking. All right. Here's some of the key benefits that we've had that truly have been helpful for us. Expertise in networking. So I'm not an expert in running a facility, and generally, most people that are working for city government are not. Like, as you said, we're good at what we do. But this is a very specialized industry, and it is relationship oriented, and it's a network, and there are conferences, and there are, you go out and meet with promoters, there's big events that are nationwide, and sending our city employees to go sit in on those events, probably not the best use of our resources, but we don't have those kind of connections, we don't have those kind of relationships. We don't know what the best practices are of the industry because we're not working in it every single day. You can take these best practices, whether it's related to security, which is becoming an increasing concern for these events, or it's just procedures of how you, even with COVID, how did they handle COVID and all the protocols and health protocols? What was the industry doing? What was the expectation of the acts when they were coming in? You garner all of that when you're working with a national company or you're working with a third party that does that day in and day out. You have access to resources for that company, so you have continuity. If we lose a marketing person and they decide to move on, they can bring in somebody else from another location. I think the key point to remember is all the people that work there, they're local. They all live in our community. We're not, unless they're getting somebody to fill in for somebody, they're out there hiring that next person. They all live and are part of our community, active in our community organizations and volunteering with all that. Anything else you want to add with that?
No, I think this is a really important slide because what we get access to by having a third-party manager for our facility is access to, booking, access to scheduling. Give you a very real example. Our assistant GM, when our facility opened, he was there for 3 years. Incredible guy. He's got a Rolodex of talent agents and tour managers in his phone. Well, he left, and he went to another ASM facility down in Oklahoma City, but he's still in the ASM family. So our current managers still tap into him and other people within the ASM network to help with booking, to help secure acts. Some shows I know specifically we simply would not get because we don't have that connection that we have with his name is Chris. So I think those things are very important to us, and Sean hit a very important point as well, that the acts have different, and groups have different expectations now in this post-COVID world, and trying to understand what that means and how you work with these different groups, and having that expertise I think is very important as well.
Flexibility is key for us. So that's one of the challenging things is, government isn't, because we are so transparent, we have very process oriented, we're not terribly flexible, right? We don't move quickly and we can't always adapt as quickly as the private market. And we can't deal with things when we can't always have the same kind of accountability. I'll give you an example. If I have a problem employee, we're civil service, right? It'll take me 1.5 years to get rid of that person, if I'm lucky, with write-ups and all of that, right? And so I'm tolerating, a person that's probably not living up to the highest expectation that we could expect from them. When you're in the private market, you have a lot more flexibility to be able to handle employees and to be able to challenge them, hold them accountable, incentivize them to maximize their potential. And so that has really been key with having that.
It's a hatchet man over here. Yeah. Watch out. You don't want to work for him.
High expectations, but we have really high expectations for our management agency. And we work very closely because we invest a lot into our facility, and we have high expectations of what we get for our return on that investment. Another thing we can't do as government is, some of the things that you have to do to get some of these acts to come into your communities, you got to be able to incentivize them. You got to put some money on the table and say, we're going to guarantee this. We're going to guarantee you $50,000 or $100,000 to make sure you can come into our community, you're not going to lose money, and you're going to be able to put on a great act. Can't do that with government money. It doesn't work real well, but we're able to do that because we're able to manage this through our third party. Timely decision-making also is critical. As I said, we don't make real quick decisions all the time as a city, but the third-party manager can, and they can act quickly when necessary to adjust for changes. And negotiating contracts. When you're booking acts or booking rental agreements, not a great situation for the city to be negotiating those type of agreements when you're trying to bring those type of talent and so forth to your community.
Right. And I'm going to speak to this slide real quick if I can, Sean. So, you know, every community, every venue is different depending on the market, depending on the expectations, depending on the previous structure. What does the commission or the council or city government expect from them? In our case, we had a change with a GM about 3 or 4 years ago. And so we were involved in the hiring process of that GM. While we didn't have to be, ASM realized that we have to be bought into who they're bringing in to lead our facility. They didn't have to do that. They could have just planted someone in there, but we had to make sure they knew our expectation was, you're gonna be part of this community. You're gonna be at chamber events. We need to see you volunteering at stuff. Like, this GM is going to be running one of our biggest assets. And so we set the stage for what our expectations were, and they've abided by that. We also have regular communication. I mean, he probably talks to people out at our venue daily, whether it's via email or regular meetings that they have. So it's not this, like, set it and forget it, it's gone, now they're running this to show. We're still very much involved in the decisions that are being made, but we're also cautious to point out the fact that it's not our facility to run. We have contracted with them to run it. So we're not going to micromanage them. They're doing the best they can. They're incentivized to make money. They're incentivized to grow the facility, to grow the revenues, and to make money. But if something happens that we feel they need to know about, we let them know. So there's times when we have, you know, kind of these sacred cow events. It's like, well, this event's been in our community for 30 years, and they feel you're charging them too much. And I can reach out to them and say, hey, Mike, this is a pretty important event to the community. Is there any pencil sharpening we can do on this one? Because this is important. This is important to this group. This is important to these people. Sometimes we make that work. Sometimes we don't. But it cuts me out of the middle versus they're not coming to the mayor because it's your facility you manage. No, I don't manage it. You need to talk to Mike. And so the potential for quid pro quo, if a clinic comes to me and says, hey, we want to be a $10,000 sponsor in your arena, great, we'll take your money. And then next year they want to break ground on a new clinic and they need a TIF or they need a rezone. You can see where there's some back scratching that could be expected there, right? Well, this removes me from that because the management company handles those sponsorships. That's not my jam. And it keeps me out of the weeds because politicians can get in the weeds really quickly on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, just hitting on that communication piece a little hard as well as this doesn't remove the owner from being actively involved in it. So as you alluded to, we're communicating on a very regular basis. We don't micromanage it, but what we do is we communicate our expectations. And by communicating those expectations, then we hold them accountable to those expectations, and that's the way we do it. Now, we talk about every management agreement is a little bit different, and you structure it to meet your expectations and what you want in terms of accountability or what your community expectations are. So, like our agreement, as we're going actually into a new negotiation for a new agreement, we're going to probably increase our qualitative fee. It's not going to be based on how much money they made, but it's going to be based on some qualitative measures that we have as a community because we want them to make sure they're taking care of our facility, and that's going to be a component of that. We want diversity of shows, not just the ones that make the most money, but we want family shows, we want this, and so those are going to be some of the metrics that we build into that qualitative component in terms of how we do that. So you have the ability to flex that and manage to what your culture, what your community expects from your facilities. Sustainability versus impact. You know, if you have a more financially profitable entity, then that's going to provide more sustainability to it. You're able to invest more funds into it or use your funds for other important public needs in your communities. It helps independence, avoiding political issues. You spoke to this really well. It does remove you from some of those things so you don't have those challenges. But I'll give you an example. That doesn't mean that we don't communicate with them on things that are really important to our community in terms of community benefits. So, for example, we have a big event that we've hosted once and they wanted to come back 2 or 3 years later, but they basically, you know, we know it's going to generate a lot of lodging for our community, and we know it's going to have a lot of economic impact, but with this big show, you know, they can go about anywhere, and they're like, you know, you basically have to give your room rentals away for free in order to accommodate them. So we work with our manager, and we actually came up with a crediting system where we credit these kind of revenues to them so that they don't lose on the incentive side, because we're sort of asking them or having this expectation that, you know, we'd like you to take a look at this because it's really important to our community, and there's going to be a lot of community impact. So communicating that with our third-party manager is really essential. And then, as you alluded to, sponsorships and marketing is a big part of our ability to generate a net income. And we're not in a position to go out and negotiate those kind of sponsorships and marketing. Or do we even have the creativity to be able to know what could be sponsorship, or how do we sell it and for how much?
Right. So we walked the facility yesterday, for instance, and there is, marketing was my background before I was a mayor. There is 6 figures of sponsorship opportunities all over that facility ready to be sold. But we as government, and I'm pointing the finger at myself, that's not what we do. We don't know how to sell sponsorships. Should government be approaching the private sector to try and sell stuff? And that's where that quid pro quo can start to sneak in. But if a third-party manager does end up taking over your facility, I can guarantee you there's a lot of revenue in the form of sponsorships that can be squeezed out of that facility right now, just based on all the blank canvases, the walls, the box areas, the premium seating opportunities. I think there's an ability for a lot of revenue there.
And then this is a quote that came off actually your resource website. This is dead on, so I'm not going to read it to you, but these are just some of the things that, you know, everything that's stated in here, we absolutely agree with. We wouldn't say that it was a great option for us if it truly didn't mean that. We can't imagine not having third-party management for our facilities, and would never go down the road of going back to having municipal or management, just because of all the flexibility and what we see the opportunities that come with that. So I know you're kind of looking at that. The last thing I think we'd leave you with is that, you know, change is hard, and this is a big change. And, you know, but it's not permanent, right? So you have the opportunity to innovate. You're seeing some challenges that you might have ahead of you, and you see some opportunities to really make a difference or make some changes. And, you know, with the discussions going on to making additional investments in this facility, what a great time to think about third-party management, because they're going to bring a lot of expertise to the table when you're looking at these and say, well, maybe you should think about this instead of this, because this is what we've seen in other communities, or this is going to provide a higher rate of return for you and what you're trying to accomplish. So this is a great opportunity to be considering this. You have fantastic facilities. Your fairgrounds are amazing. We got an opportunity to see those. So appreciate that. Well, I guess we're going to take questions later. So anything else you want to land with? So thank you. So now we're going to have Mayor Debbie Kling come and speak to us about her experience in Napa.
Good morning. How is everybody this morning? Good idea. Are you good? Good. I had the opportunity to meet just a couple people before we started, and I wish I could have met more, because I love community. So I'm Debbie Kling. I'm the mayor of the city of Napa, and actually I have a video. I think it's 1 minute. So let's take a look. So Napa is a community, and I think it's important as we're talking. I love what you guys just shared, Paul. Good job. And I'm going to try not to repeat because I agree with everything they just shared. So I'm going to try not to repeat what they shared, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are and kind of how we approach our facilities and management and why I actually support the private management. But so we're a community of about 100,000. We're about half the size of Sioux Falls. But we're a community that agriculture was the basis of our community. We are growing like crazy, but it's still important. And one of our goals as a community is how, as you grow and change, do you maintain who you are and not lose it? And that's a focus of ours, and we don't want to lose it. But so I love something that was said, and that was business run, more effective than government. And I come from the private sector. I actually was the manager of an arena in Boise, Idaho, and before becoming mayor, I was president of the Chamber of Commerce. So I understand actually all the different sides of it because I've walked in that path over the years, and I love it. So let's talk about our venues real briefly. So our arena was built in 1997, and at the time when we built this complex, which consists of an arena, an amphitheater, and the horse park, we actually, the other arena that I managed came online at the same time. And then Boise State University had an arena, then the Taco Bell arena. And so we actually had a surplus of properties in our community when they all came online. And one of the greatest challenges that the community of Napa faced was the financial deficit. That was an ongoing thing, and we're working on that. But the rodeo picture here, our venue was actually built to move our rodeo indoors. And it was really important. And one of the things that our community didn't want to lose as we moved into private management was that the rodeo and the presence of that rodeo and the importance of it in our local community. And so there's a week that's blocked out, and that is Rodeo Week. If there's a touring concert that comes through and it bookends like at the beginning or the end, they'll work with the management company. But the rodeo is the priority at the time. And then the horse park. So we love our Snake River Stampede Rodeo. It is awesome, and it's a key part of our community. Let's see, our outdoor amphitheater. It is just a wonderful asset in our community. So we host our God and Country Rally. Again, that's a long-term community event that is very important. And I don't remember how many years, but we're talking close to 50 probably that's been going on. And it's hosted with this year we moved it indoors and outdoors just due to heat. But it's important to our community. And so the reason I'm sharing these things is really to share that private management does not mean that community events go away. And that partnership that was spoken of earlier is so critical. And let's see what my next picture is. Our community events, I'm just thinking about all the different events that take place out at the Fort Idaho Center. So agriculture, that's important to me. And so I started an ag forum while I was president of the chamber, and it was in partnership with our venue management company. And I couldn't have done it without them. And we did it on the floor. And we had FFA students come in, and they brought the tractors, they did their fundraisers. Just because a venue changes from being managed by a city or to a private management company, what I want to share is that we're still community. And what we do better in that partnership. So the horse park facility, I tell you what, so the horse park it's an awesome facility and it's a great economic impact to our community, but it isn't the greatest financial revenue generator for the arena, for the complex itself. You can make more money with one good concert, actually, than you can all season with the horse park. But is the horse park important? Absolutely, it's important, and it continues to be important because of agriculture. And I don't know exactly what events take place here in the facilities, but I think, again, just to reemphasize how important that is. The other thing that I wanted to speak to were concessions. So we are managed, we've had two different management companies in our facility, but our food and beverage is outsourced actually to a third-party contractor. But they do contract with our local nonprofits who generate that their fundraising is happening through the concession environment. So like during the rodeo, you've got Kiwanis and Rotary and the Exchange Club that are all there selling, because those are important to the revenue streams for our nonprofits. But then even at concerts, and even years ago when I managed the arena and we had Sedexo was our food and beverage provider, our concession stands were managed by our local nonprofits, because that revenue that they generate is extremely important. It's also important to the facility. Well, I could go on that in several ways. It's the partnership that happens, but you know how it's hard to get staffing these days. And so with your nonprofits filling those concession stands, that is critical to the staffing shortage, and then it actually funnels money back into your local community. And so that doesn't go away just because you're under, privately managed, whether you're outsourced food and beverage or whether it's through your same contract. The concession environment is still there with your local nonprofits, which is extremely important. So let's see, and this is going back to, this is 4-H, this is our rodeo, and flipping pancakes at the rodeo with the 4-H club, that's what community is about, right? And so I think if there were one thing I want to really communicate, and I think I have, is that partnerships and community are important, and they don't go away just because we've changed the management structure. I will say that what Paul said earlier, that to depoliticize the environment is so critical when it comes to booking events and the work that gets done, that it's the people that are experts, and I'll speak to that in just a minute with our convention center. This is an indication of our profits. So we were losing almost $1.5 million, and that's direct subsidy from the city of Napa in our general fund. And we are not a wealthy city. Those dollars are important to us. One of the core values for me personally and adopted by our city council is stewardship. Well, what does stewardship look like? It really is having a long-term plan to best manage those precious dollars that we're collecting. Those are tax dollars from the citizens. And so for us, we want to reduce our deficit, and we're going in the right direction. Our 2022 numbers are, we've done over $1 million shift as it is, and this year we're going to far exceed that. And I will say during COVID, that was a difficult time. I think we budgeted at a slight loss. We did not exceed where we were. We met our budget, but it was because of the entrepreneurial thinking, the innovation, the thinking outside the box to figure out how do we make this work in a very difficult situation. And our team did an amazing job, but they were also on the phone with their other leaders across the nation within their company, and they were coming up with a lot of ideas. And so it's that collaboration that takes place within a company where you can say, okay, what are the events that you're doing? Creating your own events. And I'll go on to our Civic Center. So our Civic Center was built in 1990, and what I'm thinking is the events that we self-do, like Oktoberfest, and there's a number of different events that you do that you self-create to generate money. And that comes from those collaborative ideas that you get to be a part of. So the Napa Civic Center was built in 1990. It's a small facility. We do not have brand new facilities. We have older aging facilities, but they're great facilities. The Civic Center is the community hub for us, and it's very, very important. We have a small theater that seats about 640. The arena seats about 12,000. The amphitheater can go up a little bit more. And so we have our larger facilities there. This is smaller. You've got your ballroom, right, for your dinners. But the Civic Center likewise has, it is not a large revenue generator. It is a community place. So the Civic Center was the last venue that we moved over to private management. And before I was mayor, I strongly encouraged us to do so. Because what I saw, having been a private manager, was that the employees really, they were functioning in their little world, but they didn't know how to do what really professionally needed to be done. Great people, great hearts. So I'm going to read you, if I could get to it here. I'm going to read you a comment because it meant a lot to me from the facility manager of our Civic Center. And this was in May of 2017 is when the employees of the Napa Civic Center were actually, they felt like they were losing their jobs because we were transitioning over to the private management company. And I will say they were all scared. They were concerned. I was not mayor at the time, and unfortunately, I don't think we did a good job as a city in preparing them for the transition because they were so worried. But the outcome was, and I'll say, and I'm going to read some of this because I asked our manager, I loved his story, and I asked him to share it. He said, I had over 11 years with the city of Napa, and some of our coworkers had between 5 and 22 years. It was very concerning for their staff. They were concerned for their jobs. They were concerned about their pay, their benefits, insurance, their retirement, that they'd been contributing for years. But when the private management company came in, this was at this, I'm going to say this was OVG 360 came in. They sat down with them and talked to them. All of the full-time staff were hired, and they were put in positions for success. They didn't miss a paycheck. The company grandfathered them in to their paid time off, their sick time. They gave us the same years of service in their company as they had worked for the city. And then, let me go. I need to go here. I didn't go to. This is James Brown that's talking. James Brown had been a police officer, and then he had stepped into the event world, and he was a regular face at the Civic Center, as were Jim and Bob and some other people that we all knew. As the president of the chamber, all of our luncheons are at the Civic Center. So during this time frame, when you're transitioning, you're trusting that you're still going to have those same people there. And this was how they were all concerned. But so as James shared, he was promoted to the facility director. He is doing an absolutely phenomenal job as the face and all that he's doing. He was allowed then to hire his staff, and which he hired all of his part-time staff. He said that we learned new ways of doing settlements on events. He was showed how to work with promoters, how to provide customer-client to improve the customer-client experience. I want to say that in the depoliticizing, we had a situation that the mayor before me felt differently in how you treated things, and it really impacted our Civic Center. And one of the very important benefits that Mayor Paul talked about was sometimes the electeds need to get out of the room and let the professionals do what they need to do, because sometimes we can actually mess it up. And you can't have a venue rise and fall and the culture change based on who the newly elected is. It's too important that there's consistency. I think that's one of the greatest benefits. And so for this team, he said that they were able to contact their corporate offices to ask questions, to get help. It was important to the budget. And he said we pulled ourselves out from losing money each year to significant savings for the city. They're now on monthly phone calls with other venues. They're being sent to training. They're having their corporate staff meet with us, show us how to better ways to do our jobs. We work with other venues, and we have the support of our management company. We also have wonderful support from the city. We are at a different level of working with our events and dealing with our clients. And they now have over 5 years experience with the management company. And each year we grow to being a bigger success and continue to give outstanding client service. And the last thing he said, I asked him for a quote, but he said, it's an honor to work at our Civic Center. But he said, I grew up in our community. I live in our community, and I serve our community. And I think sometimes there's the concern that a management company is going to bring their people in. Our general manager of the Fort Idaho Center that oversees now also our Civic Center, his name is Andrew Luther. He sits on the chamber board. He chairs our tourism committee. He is so involved in our community. It's such a wonderful asset to our community. And then the long-term employees that are still there making a difference today. So as I close, and I don't know how we're doing on time, if I'm over, under, whatever. I mean, I could say a lot, but I didn't want to repeat what was already shared because I fully support it. Financially, it's been good. We do need to depoliticize things. Business-run environment is always more efficient than government. I think it's good to get government out of the way. And we need to learn from the experts, right? Because they are the experts. And I think we talked about fiscal prudence and stewardship. On stewardship, many of the decisions that we make, we're looking at what are we leaving our community in 5 years and 10 years and 20 years? And how could we better utilize those dollars? And so that's really where our focus is. And I think that's, as you look to the future, I know there's concerns. Change is hard. It's not easy, but it can be very, very good. But as was mentioned earlier too, you get to guide the direction through your contracts and and step into a relationship in a positive partnership, not in an adversarial, we have to do this. Actually, we get to do this, and it'll be good. So I'll stop at that, and John, I'll let you take us to the next level.
Good morning, everybody. John Brewer with the Billings Chamber of Commerce. I wanted to start by taking a moment to thank these wonderful people for taking a day out of running their successful communities to come and share with us. And as Mayor Tenhaiken said, this is what cities do. This is what chambers do. This is what elected folks do, is you go to other communities and you share successes. Every couple of years, the Chamber of Commerce visits another community on what we call our aspirational city visit and leadership exchange. The first time we did that was 2014, and our first city we visited was Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We had about 35 people in that first mission to Sioux Falls to learn about things, including their arena convention center. We actually did a hard hat tour of the facility as it was being built and learned about the management style. We've also visited Allentown, Pennsylvania, Oklahoma City, most recently Omaha. Let me ask you, I see a lot of familiar faces that have been to these before. How many of you have been to an aspirational city visit before? Yeah, so a lot of knowledge gained, gathered, not only, of course, on event management, but other opportunities just to learn and share from each other. So again, thank you for doing that with us today. Each of the communities that we've visited either have a private management structure or some kind of an authority structure. And most of facilities today, whether they're arenas, fairgrounds, convention centers, theaters, or ballparks, and so on, are managed privately. Are done so typically by either ASM Global or the Oakview Group. And sometimes, as we've heard this morning, there are partnerships between OVG and ASM to manage or to book events or to provide food service at public facilities. We're fortunate today to have 4 guests joining the conversation today from OVG as well as ASM Global. And I just wanted them to introduce themselves. We've got a microphone, Alex, Dan, if we could, very quickly. We wanted the leaders from these areas to just quickly say hello, introduce themselves, and maybe just share, as we heard Mayor Kling talk about, the engagement in communities and how that works. So, Brad, did you want to start?
Thanks, John. Good morning. Brad Murphy, General Manager of the Ford Wyoming Center in Casper. I work for OVG 360. I was born and raised on a large cattle ranch northeast of here in Winnett. I am a Montanan through and through. Before going to Casper, I was the Executive Director of the Adams Center, located on the campus of the University of Montana. Did that for 4 years. Before that, I was the Event and Operations Manager at MSU in Bozeman, where we ran the football stadium and the field house. So yes, I flipped from being a Bobcat to a Grizzly. Oh man. Interestingly enough, I have 4 children. 2 went to U of M, 2 went to MSU. So there's one day of the year I just get out of the house. It's not good to do. But we've had a great amount of success in Casper. The primary reason I moved to Casper was because of private management and being able to work for OVG. We have turned that building around. We save annually anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000 off of our deficit. And the real testament to our success is our relationship and our partnership with our city, our contract administrator, and our city manager. We are one, we work together, we're a partnership. We're not OVG, we're not City of Casper, we're what's right for the Ford Wyoming Center. And the ultimate reason why we've been successful in Casper, the This year we signed a 10-year renew agreement with the city that will keep our people employed through OVG for the next 10 years, through the year 2032. On top of that, OVG contributed a large financial consideration to that agreement that will now allow us to build a brand new sound system, to bring in POS systems for our concession stands that are brand new, to enhance our ADA capacities in the building, and buy new sport court for our state volleyball tournament. So, the reason I left Montana, and I'm still a Montanan through and through, was because of private management. I've worked in the city structure, I've worked in the university structure, but ultimately, the best way to run these buildings, and I've been doing this for 31 years, folks, is through private management. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tim Savona. I'm also with the Oakview Group. Been with the company roughly 13 years. Had the great honor to be in Napa during those transitions. Been in a few facilities. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is an exciting time you all are going through. The biggest thing I would just share is with private management, you're part of a network. Right now, you're kind of on an island, right? It feels that way a little bit. So it's an extension of people. It's an extension of resources. The companies who are hired as private managers only succeed if the venue succeeds. If the client's not happy, we're not there. It's that simple. We can't bring a bus of 30 brand new employees in. It's unrealistic. You know, I get this visual of like artificial intelligence robots that come in and kick everybody out of the way. It doesn't happen. You know, what we do is we fill gaps. We fill blanks. We provide resources and work-life balance. Because at the end of the day, that helps things succeed long-term. Happy people, happy employees, better productivity. So that's what we aim for. But thank you for being here. Good luck in this process. Talk to you.
Thanks, Tim. Catherine?
Good morning, all. I can't match your Montana story, but I'm a Nebraska girl through and through, and I'm a 4-H kid. So while I didn't get to go to the fair yesterday, I've heard great things, and you've had a great turnout, so congratulations on that. I think to not overstep what everyone else has said, the key to private management and what we've seen in our success, and specifically with Sioux Falls, is really getting to the community at the core. You know, whether it's a conversation about, hey, this event's really important to us, how do we make this happen, to taking a macro lens and bringing that in. But I've had a lot of conversations with probably some of you in this room. I think the concerns that come from, you know, the big guys coming in and how do we make this work. This is an enhancement. This is just a support system to come help you do what you're doing better, and elevate those aspects that maybe are a struggle or maybe need a little bit of help. We talked about the capital program a little bit as well. So there's just more resources available, so that everyone's running with productivity, and you know that there's success across the board. It's not a replacement, it's an enhancement. So thank you all for having us.
Catherine,
Yeah.
I'm not sure you mentioned your title or who you're with.
Catherine Crone with ASM Global. Apologies. I am Vice President of Business Development. I do work with the corporate team, but I have a local focus. So spend time with our communities across the board to figure out how we can be a better partner and truly form that partnership. I think you've heard that from everyone. Nobody's successful unless we collaborate. So
Thank you.
thanks, John.
And I'm Chuck Deneau, also here on behalf of ASM Global. Born and raised in Sydney. We spent a lot of time at Metro events growing up. Now live in Helena. But I think, I just want to encourage you all. That there's a lot. I think the opportunity here is evident. We need to spread this throughout the community and encourage people to weigh in on this and support what the county is considering here. So. This is an important event, but I think it really needs to be carried forward. And thanks for having us today.
Thank you, Chuck. So we have Dan Brooks, who we met earlier, with a mic. He'll be roving around looking for hands to go up. Alex Tyson is the executive director for Visit Billings, and she's got the mic on this side of the room. So please raise your hand if you have any questions. But Alex, do you want to start?
I would love to start. Thank you so much for being here. As John mentioned, I'm Alex Tyson. I'm the executive director of Visit Billings. Our staff is here today and many of our board members. We manage the state lodging tax as well as the Tourism Business Improvement District Fund and are a tourism arm essentially of the chamber and our DMO for the community. From our standpoint, we are both a partner and a client to MetraPark staff. You know, when you obviously bring in citywide events like a Gold Wing Road Riders Association or BMW Motorcycle Rally, NAIA Division I Women's National Basketball Championships, we're signing the contract to rent the facility. And so I think that I think the TBID is upwards of $500,000 in helping these larger citywide groups come to the community. At the same time, we're also a partner. The MetraPark staff placed the Montana High School Association bids for their state tournaments every spring. And about 10 years ago, the county commissioners put into policy that no event can not be paying the capital improvement program fee. And so there was a situation where the Montana High School Association wouldn't allow that fee to be assessed to their fans on the tickets, and so we were kind of at a little bit of a stalemate. And the TBID came forth and said, hey, we'll go ahead and cover that. Those events are very important to the community, especially given it's normally a cold season event. So that being said, as a client and partner of MetraPark staff, can you help guide through and just what it looks like in your communities, how the destination marketing and management organizations work with your facilities?
I'll start. Well, that's a great example. Because there's a constant tension where the CVBs want to give everything away, okay, to get the events there, and the facility needs to make money. So there's a natural tension that exists. And that's not a bad thing. That's your job, is to bring people to this community and to incent them to come. And the facility says, we want them to come too, but we can't do it for free. So a lot of times in examples like that, if I'm just being candid, I sometimes get put in the middle, where our CVB director calls me and says, hey, the center wants to charge $20,000 for room rental, but this is the high school basketball tournament, and they don't have this money in the state high school budget. What are we going to do? So 9 times out of 10, we just figure it out. We just get them together, and I say to the facility manager, hey, this is the situation we're in. Is there a way to get to yes on this? So this is a win-win for both. But also under the guise that I don't manage the facility. So there's a legal issue too, that if I tell that facility what to do and what to charge and not charge, and then they don't hit their incentive goals, then they'll say, oh, we didn't hit them because this mayor micromanages us and tells us we should give this away and not give this away. So it's this interesting tension that exists. But we make it very clear to the facility that they have 2 goals. 1, maximize revenue, but secondly, promote the community benefit. And they can coexist. So it's not just how can we squeeze every dime out of every group. It's also, this is important. This one is important for these reasons, and we got to find a way to make it work. So it comes down, like most of our world, to relationships and just making sure that the relationships are solid.
Thank you. I'm just going to echo that. Our environment is very different than that, and we do not have the same opportunity to have a tourism entity that can supplement or whatever. And so we don't face it like that, but the political side we absolutely do face. I dealt with it this week where we have a group that's reached out to me. I think the separation it's extremely helpful to separate from the political side the venue, because the venue is there, but again, it's just as was just said, ensure that you have identified what your top priorities and your goals are from the onset. Because there are certain events that come in that have a very high economic impact but don't have the fiscal impact or the bottom line for the facility. And you have to weigh those out all the time. But as Mayor Paul said, it's about relationships, right? Build the partnership, have the discussions, and look at what your ultimate outcome and goal is on an annual basis.
Thank you.
Great. Questions? microphone's coming around here. We got a microphone here.
Excuse me, for Napa, when your nonprofits run the concession stands, what percentage of the revenue goes back to those nonprofits?
I maybe have to defer to Tim because he would probably know that. I don't know that number off the top of my head. Tim, do you know the answer to that? Well, actually, because food and beverage is done through Sodexo, a third management, but Tim, would you like to answer that? Okay, I'll let you guys answer it. Okay. I don't care which way it goes. There we go.
In Casper, we use nonprofits to run all of our concession stands. They receive 12% of the gross sales off of that stand. So in a lot of events, they will walk with anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 working for 4 hours. So that's how it works.
There's also a second level of subcontractors. So if you're a subcontractor and you have your own business, then there's a percentage split where the venue only takes like 25 or 30%. So there's two different scenarios there, depending on, what the real conversation is.
Thank you. Next question. And just, we do
I'm
want
coming, Taylor, here.
and we are going to use microphones for the recording for Community 7 as well as KTVQ. So thank you, even though you can be heard throughout the room, we want to use the microphones.
My question was regarding the fee, the entertainment fee. How much is that fee, and then does Napa also have an entertainment fee?
Every state and local municipality is different. We do not have an entertainment fee. And I'm not sure how your entertainment fee works to where it may be a little different. So, do you guys have one? Okay.
Yeah, we have a couple. We have the entertainment tax, which we affectionately call the bed, booze, and board tax. It's on lodging, alcohol, and restaurants and some ticketed events. And that's 1% by state law. It's required to be used for promotion of the community, marketing, and to support entertainment venues. And so our community chooses it primarily for the support of the entertainment communities. And we use that to finance our repairs and maintenance, as well as our capital improvements. So we have dedicated funding just for capital improvements, and and we also use it. We do provide a subsidy to our Washington Pavilion of Arts and Science because it's just a different animal. It's not a profit-driven operation, but that tax generates about $10 million per year for our community. We also have a public facilities fee, and that is kept within the operations. So we charge anywhere from $2 to $4 per ticket on top of the ticket price. That's public facilities fees. People call them something differently. The way we handle that is some people put it towards capital improvements. We just put it into operations, so that it's allowed to be used within a revenue of the operations.
Thank you very much. That's just what I needed. My second question is also about money. Who paid to build the facilities? And then, obviously, you both got great plans for the future. So, who will you look to? Will it be a mill levy? Will it be, are you putting into a capital fund? What's the plan when you make your next what made this expansion so these facilities were there? And then who will do it next time? Is it the city? Is it the county? Is it state?
So when we built our event center, so our convention center, all of that is paid off. They were bonded back in the day in the early 90s, so those have been paid off some time ago. Our event center is, Mayor stated, $117 million facility that was bonded, supported by our second penny sales tax. So we use our second penny. We have 3 pennies. The second penny is used for capital improvements and for debt service. So this was done previous to our administration, but they supported it through the sales tax. So we're still paying on that particular bond at this time. So the city contributed for all of that. And then as we look to the future, we'll either look at the sales tax, second penny sales tax for capital improvements, as well as the fact that our entertainment tax has grown quite so much right now in terms of it. And we've taken really good care of our facilities and really bringing them, especially our little bit aging convention center, that we now have some capacity within the entertainment tax to support bonding. So we might look to that for some of those improvements.
And it's, every state and city is so different and unique because you don't have sales tax, but we don't have state income tax, all right? So we don't get any money from the state, but we have to rely on our 2-cent sales tax for most of that. So it's always kind of interesting when you go and talk with other governments is, like I said, if you've seen one project, you've seen one project, because the legislature is different, the taxation authority is different, and
So our question was about yours. Yours is paid for by us. You don't, we would go to the property owners.
Right.
We pay a property tax, so we would go to a mill then. But you don't have that. How about Napa? How do you do it?
So our Civic Center was built by just community donations initially. The Fort Idaho Center is paid for, and our rodeo played a very big role in getting that done. So we have no debt on either facility. We also don't have any taxes that we can assess to help fund. So there is, the state tourism tax is used strictly for promotion. None of it comes to the city. Our legislature has not allowed us to have like a local income tax that we can do at the city level. So we really don't have, if we wanted to do, we are looking to go after an auditorium district, which we are allowed to do, but it has to be voted in. And we could put a 2% to 3% tax on the bed tax that would come in, and that could be used, but it's a process to get there. So ours has really been funded, the deficit's 100%, and the capital is coming out of our city general fund. So we don't have some of the same opportunities. However, we do have income tax, we have property tax, we have state shared revenue that comes back to the city. Fortunately, it's been up, and so that's what's helping fund some of our smaller capital improvements, but anything massive is gonna have to be a debt. And then there's also partnerships when you go out to bid that you may have some incentives that come in with your management companies or your food and beverage companies to do some of those improvements that need to be done.
Thank you for taking my question. There's a very emotional issue relative to 4-H, what's going to happen with that. I started showing sheep as a 4-H FFA person in 1957, so you can do the math. But I think the issue is, are we going to lose opportunities for 4-H? And you particularly from Sioux Falls, I've been there, mentioned how you deal with issues like that may not pay a lot of money. So just wanted you to comment particularly about the 4-H. You know, you talk about children and things become very emotional. So can you comment then?
well, first off, I have to point out that Sean showed rabbits when he was growing up. So he's a 4-H kid at heart, chief rabbit shower here. But I think Mayor Kling mentioned this, where sometimes there are direct bottom line financial ramifications to the facility, but then there's secondary financial ramifications to the community. So 4-H brings in families and people from all over the region that come here to show cattle, to show sheep, what's going on right now. And so there's an economic benefit of that to the community. I think one thing that is very important in this entire discussion is seeing a management company is not an us versus them. They are your partner, right? They are your partner. And if the community is not satisfied with the decisions they've made and how they've run the facility, you got a contract, 3-year contract, and at the end you say, listen, you guys screwed up on the 4-H thing, we need to do this better, we need to do this different. You have an opportunity to continually negotiate terms on what you want to see done differently, better, and so forth. So on that 4-H example, to me, would fall into that community benefit side, okay? Is it gonna bring a lot of money to the facility? No. Is it a big community benefit piece? Absolutely. We have something similar with our facility called Pheasant Fest. It's huge. We're the pheasant hunting capital of the world, and people come from all over the world to come hunt pheasants. But the Pheasant Fest folks want us to give basically the whole facility away because of what they bring in. And the economic impact of that, while not directly to the facility, if we give away the facility, what it does to the community is tremendous. And so we work with the facility to do some credits and some other things to make it whole on their incentive balance sheet, but also make sure it works for the community. So if 4-H is that important to the community here, which I know it is, that would be something you'd sit down with the management company and say, here's a few of the sacred cows we have in this community. 4-H event, the Nile, these different things that these are very important, just like Rodeo Week in Napa.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, you build it into your contract at the onset. So in Napa, that rodeo, it's built into the contract. It's the same week every year, you know that it's coming, and it's set aside, and it is what it is. And that, so you go in negotiating that up front. And I agree, I grew up in 4-H my entire life. Horses, cows, dogs, cooking, sewing, photography, everything else. And I understand that 4-H is important because that was my life. I grew up in Kansas before I was in Idaho. But so just put it in the contract at the get-go, and that takes care of that. And then as you said, as you go along, you negotiate it. But there may be the spring shows, right? I don't know how yours go, but ours, we had a spring show. But the county fair, if that's what you're referring to, yeah, just put it in the contract.
Any thoughts from the rabbit lobby, or are we?
Yeah.
Good, all right. Ron?
My question is, when it comes to setting prices for events, does the management group have full control over that? Do you have to run it by the governing body? How does that happen? Do you ever get into any back and forth over those things?
So the management company has the authority to set the pricing for the events. And I think there's a huge benefit in that, depending on what the event is. I mean, concerts, it's the promoters, and it just stays right there. We do all sorts of things like state girls basketball, boys basketball, wrestling tournaments, all of that. They're working with the local associations, and they're determining that. We don't usually get involved in that, and it's really best not to get the political side involved, but to let them do what they know how to do.
Can have it where they have to bring forward kind of what their rate structure is going to be for like a particular room type of rental. But they're always negotiating from that based on food and beverage, how much they're selling. It's always a flexibility. So, and it's like you said, it's not something we want to get involved in necessarily unless it becomes an issue, you know, where there's a concern that they're not getting the benefit or they're too hard being negotiated with, which rarely happens. I'd say the biggest issue we had was during COVID because we had all these people canceling stuff and they made deposits and there was contracts and they wanted to walk away from their contracts, and that was probably the most challenging time. But we rarely get involved in any of that because it's really complicated and every single event is different. So.
We have time for a couple more.
Tim.
Yeah, Tim Goodridge, General Manager, MetraPark. My question is probably for the private management companies because it seems like none of you have been involved in the transition from public to private. What I want to do is get some advice that can be given to the governing bodies, both the chamber and also our county commissioners, to help the existing employees feel like they're more than a political football. Because while all of these discussions are happening, we're still running the facility all the time. We're still serving the customers. And I would push against that we have a culture of no at MetraPark. I don't believe that that's the case at all. And if you talk to any of our renters and how we bend over backwards to make all these things happen, that's certainly not the case. But during this transition period, what happens when we work at MetraPark is that we feel like we're portrayed as a failure and that private management is going to have to come in and help us to succeed. And we want to make sure that you understand that we work really hard and that we have delivered the best financial performance in the history of MetraPark in really difficult circumstances where the entire management team is operating as interim. We don't know what the outcome is going to be. And so that's the difficulty that we have now, is we feel like there's nobody advocating for us because we're being used to facilitate whichever party wants to go in a particular direction. So if we could get some advice to our public officials and also to some of our public bodies who are channeling and directing this whole process, I would really appreciate that, so that the people that work at MetraPark every day to still keep it going, keep the doors open, and make sure that you know, you can come and enjoy Montana Fair because that's going on right now. We have 3 more days to go. It looks like we're going to have a record-breaking fair again. So we need reassurance, and we also need some cheerleading for the people that are down there doing the hard work, that, you know, this is not going to happen without some input from us too.
Yeah, I'd love to respond to you to say, first of all, I'm sorry. Because I've walked in your shoes, and that is a very difficult place to be. And I think what I saw with the city of Napa that we didn't do well when we were transitioning was the electeds did not communicate well to the employees. And so I would strongly encourage the electeds to communicate to the employees. First of all, you guys are the ones that make it happen every day. And it isn't that you're not doing a great job. So when I encouraged our Civic Center to move to private management, because we had amazing people, they were doing a great job, but they weren't getting the support they needed to succeed. Our job as electeds should be to help people succeed. That's my mission every day with my leadership team, to help them succeed. And so you've got great people that are the face of the organization, and the only reason the community gets to enjoy what they do is because of the service that you guys provide. So I want to say, first of all, thank you for doing that. And then as you lead your team, encourage them, they're not going to lose their jobs, and that this isn't because they're not doing a good job. And I can't speak to this exact culture, but I can speak to it generally. You're doing a great job, but what the hope is that you have the support to continue to do, looking into the future, that you have the backing. And that's what our team said. And that's why I shared that story from James, from our Civic Center, because he got to step into, he got the training that he wanted to have. He got the connections professionally. And it was an awesome outcome. So it's a positive outcome. It can be very exciting, not negative. And I think that is I'm glad you actually stood and spoke up, because that's an important message, that as a community as a whole, it isn't that MetraPark isn't doing a good job, and it isn't that you guys aren't doing a good job. It's that we can take it to the next level by supporting you and helping you succeed in what you do. That would be my communication.
Thank you, Mayor. Anybody from ASM Global or Oakview Group want to respond?
3 points. Again, same with OVG 360. I would just say that, you know, both Brett and myself have been through a transition as you laid out, from public to private. And it's hard, there's no doubting that. But to the employees, if you love what you do, if you're passionate about what you do, and, you know, if you're half decent at what you do, you're gonna be just fine. You know, the company's gonna come in, the company's gonna help understand the assets that you provide as an individual or as a team. Ask you your goals, ask you what you think your strengths and weaknesses are, and find out ways where you would fit in, or where you'd like to fit in. You know, it's a dialogue. It's a back and forth conversation. We have a high retention rate because these are the people that know the community. What we do is we provide added reach, added support, added resources. You know, like I said, you guys do a fantastic job. When you have 150 accounts or whatever the number may be, you can get on these phone calls with regional support. Oh, these guys are doing this. And it'll go both ways. You know, Billings would teach another market a lot too. Like, oh wow, we never thought to do it like that. So it really becomes a healthy collaboration. And I can relate to what you're going through. It's a human response. I can't relate to the political environment, right? I'm just a venue manager. But keep doing what you do. You know, keep working hard and ask questions. So thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, Brad again from Casper. Echo exactly what Tim said. So when we took over Casper in October 2016, there was an article in the paper last Friday that we came into Casper and we cut positions and we took full-time positions and made them to part-time. That was absolutely false. Totally incorrect. I was on the phone with Rob Rogers on Monday morning and said, your report was wrong. When we came into Casper, every one of our full-time people retained their position. Not only did we retain all those positions at their full benefits with all their leave balances,
We also added positions. We added a director of finance and we added a director of corporate partnerships. So we actually increased the number of full-time employees. So we retained everyone, nobody lost their job. And the key is that it was the communication, that we got there right away, we vetted everybody, we said, hey, it's gonna be okay. And we did not have a single employee leave. Everyone stayed. So it's all about that communication and vetting it and reassuring those employees. And I've had calls from MetraPark employees saying, am I gonna lose my job? They are not. They're not gonna lose their jobs.
Thank you, Brad.
Last comment that I'll add, I think it's more of providing a playbook, right? Echoing everything that everybody else has said. It's not that you're not doing a great job or that somebody has to come in and do it. It's providing a playbook and those resources to the incredible staff that you already have. I mean, to your point, everybody's doing a great job and they're amazing people, then they have nothing to worry about. But, on the flip side, when you transition in and out of places, right, keeping that team intact and keeping the morale that you have going that's running this, record fair this year is key. And so how do we just enhance and elevate that and understanding what it means for the community, right? And are there other resources in the community that we haven't tapped into that we could bring in and be more successful? How do we make the concessions more successful? How are we more open to 4-H? Taking a different lens of maybe having the accessibility to do more.
Thank you. And, Tim, as we've talked before, and as I've talked to Bill Dutcher and the commissioners, the intent of the chamber is crystal clear in terms of, information that the mayors have shared up here, that we support the staff. We want to see government get out of the way. We want to see politics being taken out of MetraPark. And we all realize that that's the barrier right now. And that's the challenge to be solved. Did I see a hand go up or a microphone, or is that right over here, Taylor? What last question?
I already spoke. Somebody else has a question. No one else does? Thank you very much. And seriously, I already spoke, and I'm aware of that, and I don't mean to take any more time. What I'm thinking about as I listen to you is the difference, of course, in governments, but none of you manage a fair. None of you have a fair on your grounds. None of you on the panel have a fair. When I think what that's a big thing for us, of course, and we're in it right now, and of course you went down and saw it. It seems to me that perhaps managing a building is different than managing a service. I mean, I kind of totally agree on the building thing. But when you're managing a service that's multiple areas of a community, I mean, like, what I'm trying to get to is it's not just you make a deal for 4-H. 4-H is all year long. There's shooting sports, and there's the dress review, then there's the feeder show, then there's the horse show, then there's the rabbit show. It's all year long. And I was impressed with when you said in Napa there's times this horse facility isn't very profitable. And I can imagine that when you're dealing with team ropers, or there's not much profit there, But I'm thinking, how do you guys deal with that when they say, here's a facility, you need to offer this with no profit? You need to have rabbit shows coming in. Rabbit shows can't pay for anything. And shooting sports, they can't pay for anything. And the team ropers can't pay for anything. Just please continue to manage that. Well, how do we do that? I mean, and we're going to have multiple ones throughout the year that come to you. It's not just we make a deal for shooting sports. It's going to be dress review we'll be dealing with next month. And so the yin and the yang is so important, like you said. How do you go back and forth? But it's not something you can just set in the contract. It's throughout, it's going to occur again and again and again, because we want the next group to say, well, we want to do a team roping. Oh, I can't do that. That's only one team roping a year in the contract. Only 1 week of rodeo in the year in the contract. You can't have a second rodeo. That would cost too much money. And I think it comes down to who you go back to deal with. And in your case, you go to the city, and the city isn't asking the taxpayers for the money. In our case, it's the county, and the only place we have to go for money is to the county taxpayers who own property. And so it's just a completely different situation. That's why our county is so is so connected to the taxpayer. We got to sell this to the taxpayers. When this is over, all of us community leaders, chamber never, we got to sell this to the taxpayers. We got to sell it. This is what we need, and everybody needs to vote for it. And it can't be, and then come back later and say, but you can't have, I'd like to know what the county agents in your communities say. What would the county agents say in your community about your facility? And probably they would say, we don't use that facility because we can't afford to use it. And that's what we're fearful of. So it's a yin and yang, and we got a long ways to go in this. We so appreciate you coming and helping us get our arms around it. But a county system responsible to taxpayers who don't have a sales tax is quite a bit different deal. So thank you. And unless you comment on that, feel free to comment on it. But I think running the facility, the building makes a lot of sense. Running a facility like a team roping arena that you're going to run for free a lot of the time, it doesn't seem to make that much sense.
Comment a little bit about that. So we have a county fair, but it's run by our county. In our case, it's run by a nonprofit who manages it, and I don't know if they're even subsidized or if they're I think they're self-funding for the most part. Other than that, the county would probably pay for.
Facility?
It's not our own facility. Yep. So it's a little bit different in that situation. But that doesn't mean that hybrid doesn't exist in the system. It just doesn't happen to exist in our community. So, right. So I think that ASM and OBG have had that sort of, and they build that, and they can give some guidance as to how they've dealt with that. Because your concern isn't probably any different than any others. And a fairgrounds is built for 4-H and FFA. They're well aware of that. I mean, that is what they deal a lot with, is for those fairgrounds instead. And that's a big part of what the fairgrounds do.
Yeah. And recognizing, like for us, there are a lot of outbuildings, as John just reminded me. We've got different buildings, and so it's like when a smaller event comes in, it doesn't take the whole thing, right? You're working, and they're very accustomed to that. But the key is, and would you like us, did you want us to give some closing remarks? Let me just step into a closing remark.
No, we've got a couple more first.
Okay, a couple more. So, you know what, I think the key is, you've got private management companies that totally get this. If it is not profitable at all, they may say, hey, we don't want that piece of business, right? So they get it, and they'll help us manage, but like the city of Napa, it is our taxpayers that are paying this bill directly. It comes out of general funds, it comes out of taxes, and our whole goal is to reduce the taxpayer burden. And so it's looking down the road, how can we get that deficit down to where those dollars can be put into other critical resources that the county needs? And so if we can do that, that's the goal.
Catherine?
I was just gonna echo that, the goal of a private manager, Taylor, is that in partnership with the county, and I think 98% of our contracts and probably OBG 360s are with municipal clients, the counties being major stakeholders in that. The county fairs that we do run are with the county. Our goal is to make sure that, while maybe not a profitable state, that we're net neutral and that we're not at a deficit. But the civic component, the community component in everything that we do, venues don't exist unless the people are in them, and we don't have a job unless people keep coming. And so finding that balance, Taylor, with tax dollars, with being beholden to the county as our extension in partnership is key. And so taking a look at all of that programming throughout the year, throughout multiple years, and having that macro lens of what needs to be there and what space it needs to hold in each space is how we find success. And I can share some examples as well of how that interacts with the counties that we've had across the board.
Thank you. Did you want to?
Not to pour it on, but think about it like this. These things are all happening right now today, right? Hypothetically speaking, you saw the examples of these structures. A private management company would come in and assume things at a net neutral. A private management company is not going to focus their efforts on making 3 extra nickels on a 4-H show. They're going to focus on how do we activate the remainder of the campus during the 4-H show, so that when we have people here working and doing X, Y, and Z, we can let that be because they're a healthy part of our foundation, but we're going to focus our energies over here where we have another event. We're not going to be in a scenario where we're going to have to pick 4-H over Garth Brooks, right? We're going to say 4-H is happening. How do we supplement more revenue on the campus or other events or more events? Anybody that comes in and just starts charging more nickels, again, it's going to be nickels, right? You're not going to have tens of thousands of dollars on these events. You're going to destroy your customer base and your fan base and your client base, you know? So it's a fair concern, but trust that any private manager has gone through this and lives through this and understands where the opportunities lie and kind of the area of like, we probably shouldn't mess around here. We should focus over here.
Thank you, Tim. We have one final question for each of the panelists in wrap up. And as we've discussed throughout the program, you know, change is hard and it's very difficult. But you know, for Billings, this is new. This is a new topic, a new idea. But keeping in mind, this model has been around for a very long time, 20 plus years in some of these communities. So we've got a lot to learn from the folks sitting up here today. And I just wanted to leave everybody today with one final thought from each of our panelists as to what is that one takeaway as Billings and Yellowstone County is considering this transition. What's your piece of advice that you'd like us to leave with? Mayor?
It's more, well, thank you. Thank you. You know, something I share a lot is few can be successful unless a lot of others want them to be. And unity is important. Division and strife tears everybody down. Come together with an open mind, knowing that ultimately you're all looking for the same positive outcome, right? You have amazing people that are working hard every day to do the best. The goal is to support. So my piece of advice is don't get stuck on your individual whatever it is, right, that you're going to champion, right? Come together with an open mind, be willing to think outside your box, work together collaboratively, and remember that you guys are Billings. I like to say we are Napa, right? You are Billings. You guys are community, and you need to be one, not divided. And also look at what the decision you're making is going to, what the outcome is going to be in 10 years and in 20 years. And I think, yeah, and I am all about stewardship. How do we best care for our citizens' dollars? And if we can improve that and put more money back in their pocket or better manage the asset we have, then that should be a good goal.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor.
Two thoughts. First is to the gentleman that currently runs MetraPark. I didn't want to chime in, but I will say, I think it's a case of where you have great people and they want to put a good structure and even a better structure in place for you to be even more successful. So I think from what I've seen, the facilities are great, the grounds are great, everything is great. But how can we provide you with even more tools and resources to do your job even better? And to me, that's what private management has done for us, is it's allowed us to be more efficient with the properties that we've been entrusted with as, you know, as from the taxpayers. The second thing though, and this is just the gospel according to Paul, but I just really believe government just does not belong in for-profit entities. And so when there's companies that want to do the work of managing venues, managing golf courses, private ambulance, we have ambulance services in Sioux Falls, and there's people who think we should be running our ambulance service. But I got a company that wants to provide that service, and they submit a bid every year. It's costing the taxpayers this much money in Sioux Falls to do ambulance. If we took it on, it would cost us millions of dollars. So I'm like, why would we want to get into the ambulance business? These people want to do it, take all the risk, take all the loss, have it. And I think that's the same way with a discussion like this. If there's companies that want to do this and are incentivized to make it successful, it seems like that's a better role, so we can focus on crime, infrastructure, wastewater, the things that are the core kind of tenets of government.
I guess I would leave with this. First of all, we got an opportunity to go out to the fairgrounds and the arena, and I would say, one, we're very envious of your fairgrounds. It is very clear that your county has put a lot of capital and funds into keeping that a great facility, and so you're very lucky to have that facility here, and we are envious of that. It's also hard to imagine that your arena is 47 years old when you're looking at it. Certainly, there's areas, you know, but when you look at it, and I know it was rehabbed in 2010 and so forth, but just it's been well taken care of, and so it's you can very much take pride in that facility. I think the big concern when these changes happen is, and leaving you with this, you're worried about losing what you have, and that's really not the concern. You're going to keep what you have. You're missing what you don't know you could get. And that's what private management will bring to you, is you're gonna have an opportunity to go after those things you don't even know you have an opportunity at, because you haven't necessarily had the structure or access to the resources that get you there. Billings is growing up as a community, and sometimes we make that pivot point, right, where, wow, we're getting to be kind of a big town, and now we need to have that kind of professional service. And this has worked great for the community for many, many decades, but now you're kind of maybe at that pivot point where you get to, how much better, how do we get to the next level? And that, I think private management, in our estimation, would get you there, so.
Wonderful. Great thoughts, everybody. Thank you. KTVQ, we want to thank you so much for helping sponsor this event and making it a reality. The folks, the board from Visit Billings and Alex, we appreciate your support in helping bring this to everybody, this event. Want to remind everybody of our resource page that Dan had referred to early on at billingschamber.com. You can find a list of frequently asked questions along with some of the documents that were shared today. We've got the PowerPoint slides that were shared today, and we're happy to pass those along as well. Just one more time, please. These folks didn't have to come today. They didn't have to fly in last night. They didn't have to rework their schedules, city council meetings that had to be rescheduled to be with us today. So if you would please, Mayor Tenhaiken, Mayor Kling, and Sean, thank you so much for being with us. One final housekeeping: if you parked in the garage, there's a new validation process. We have the tickets, the stickers that'll go on your card if you did park in the garage. So please see Isaac back here or Kathy over in the corner here, and we'll get you stuck, I guess. Have a great day, everybody.